Okay, here we go. You guys good tonight? Good, yeah. Are you alive?
Yep.
Yes? No?
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
So, do we have any questions from last week? What I covered last week, because I'm going to continue on that this week. No? That's good. Still here. Kind of a yucky, rainy night tonight, huh? Can't complain. We haven't had any rain in like 2 months, right? Pretty
Well,
much.
it's not always rain.
Nothing.
I like rain. Rain is magical.
Okay.
Makes things grow.
So I'm working out of a book tonight called How to Sell Clear and Simple, written by Harry Frisch. So you can get this online if you want, or you can get it from here. So last week, or the last couple weeks, I've been talking about your valuable final product, right? Mm-hmm. Can you tell me what that is, Joe? Take a stab at it?
Let's switch gears. That is the final output for what you are producing, whether it's a service or a physical product.
That's right. So it's the end result of your product or service.
Yes.
And it becomes valuable because somebody pays you for it. The only reason why you have money or don't have money is because of a valuable final product. If you need more money, then you need to create more valuable final products or deliver more valuable final products. So the final product part of it is part of it. So if I were to sell you this pen for $10, the pen is more valuable to you than the $10 because you're giving me hard-earned cash to get it. But the pen has to work. Okay? Now, I'm not going to cover this tonight. I'm actually going to do this either next week or the week after. But how do you deliver a product that is so valuable that you don't even need to have advertising? Right? Because really, and this is coming from a hardcore, and Al can tell you this, a hardcore advertising guy. I mean, I am a hardcore advertising guy. I eat, sleep, and drink advertising. Right, Al?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. If your product was that good that word of mouth spread and it became viral, you wouldn't need advertising and marketing. Okay? So what we're talking about is networking and getting that, getting that catalyst or the word of mouth spread around, in essence, can cut your advertising budget. So if your product was that valuable or the service was that good, you really wouldn't need to advertise or market because it would go viral in an ideal world. That doesn't happen a lot, so a lot of us have marketing budgets and advertising budgets and stuff like that, right? SEO managers, yeah. Guys like me to promote you on websites. Now, you have to take a look at when you're doing something like this, there's a triangle called the 3 ends, something Dan Kennedy came up with. And the 3 ends, I'm not going to get into this tonight either, is your message, your market, and your media. So your triangle has to be balanced, because if you don't have a message, a market, and a media, then it won't work. It'll be unbalanced. You could have the best message and the best market. Market is just simply the public that you're talking to, or the people that would be interested in that valuable final product, because ultimately this triangle is pushing that. So the VFP is being pushed out on this triangle. So you have to have a message, a market and a media. Okay? So if the message is really correct, that it's the most valuable thing ever, and it goes to the right market, in other words, somebody that wants to buy it, okay? Like, I'm off topic, but you ask any business owner, what would be an ideal marketing campaign? Ask any business owner, and they'll fumble around, and they'll make something up because they're not thinking with that. And at the end, inevitably, 99% of the time, I'll say to them, that's really good, but why don't you ask me what my ideal marketing campaign is? And my ideal marketing campaign is to sell hamburgers to a hungry crowd. In other words, have a hungry crowd. And then the marketing becomes easy. So the reason why I'm bringing this up tonight is because last week we were talking about the sales process, right? So how do you get somebody interested? I mean, getting them interested through your marketing and your networking is one thing, but how do you get to the money? Okay? And I'm going to show you those 5 steps in a minute. We were talking about those 5 steps last week, and I promised that I was going to go over how to do a presentation. Okay? But the gist of tonight's conversation is around this thought process, which I just lost. Oh my God, we're getting late.
Go through the steps.
Oh, I got it. So, yeah. So the thought process is this. There's 2 ways to sell something in my head. One, you can individually, nose to nose, toe to toe, either through your marketing, through the internet, whatever media you use, can go through the convincing process. So with that said, if I have this pen and Joe wants to buy this pen and it costs $10, obviously $10 for a magic marker is a little bit excessive, but if I have benefits to go with it, or if I have whatever to go with it, and I handle his objection, stalls, and resistance, which are what he's going to give me before he gives me the $10, right? You with me?
Yes.
So you're going to have considerations why you should or shouldn't buy the pen. Sales has a bad name because it's usually too forceful. And I give you ultimatums, like, well, you have to buy it today, otherwise the price is going up tomorrow.
That makes sense now.
Okay, so that's an objection. What happens is most sales representatives don't realize that there's 12 to 18 objection, stalls, and resistance in a sales process. When you first spot those 12 to 15 or 12 to 18 objection, stalls, or resistance, and you just label them, that's half the stress in the battle in the sale. Then coming up with persuasive answers is vital. So if Joe says, well, I really don't think I need to buy that pen because I don't think it's worth $10. You have to have a persuasive answer because that's a real consideration. Okay? Now you have to make sure that the objection, stall, or resistance is actually true, because there's such a thing as a misdirector, which is something like Joe might say, well, I don't have the $10. Now that could be true, or it could not be true. It could be just as simple as you're trying to misdirect me on closing you for the $10. Because there's only 2 things that can happen in a sales cycle. Joe sells me, Joe's the client, and I'm the salesperson. He closes me on his objections, or I close him on he really needs it. There's only 2 things that can happen in a sales cycle. Okay? So what you have to be careful of is that you're not getting a misdirector, that it's actually something that is real. It's not some comment or something to throw you off on your sales cycle. Make sense? So that's one way that you can sell something, is you go through that process. you convince somebody that they need that. And I don't mean that like a used car salesman trying to close you before you leave the sales floor and you have turnovers with managers and they're trying to shove shit down your throat when you don't want it. Or not granting you the beingness of the customer, being who you are and letting you go through the process. Okay? The second way that you can sell, and this is an executive decision. This is the second way you can sell. You can make the offer so irresistible and so wicked hard to refuse that you don't need to have the sales process, or the sales process is a lot less than it should need to be. So the offer is so ridiculous that you can't refuse it, especially if you want that specific thing. If it's going to solve your problem, and you know it's going to solve your problem, and the offer is so ridiculous that you're willing to try it before you commit. And this is where the introductory offer comes in play, because if the introductory offer is so amazing that you're willing, like suppose a used car guy said to you, well, how about if I give you the car for 2 weeks and you drive and do whatever you want before you buy the car, right? That would give you reason to maybe do business with that guy, because you get to try it out first. I'm not saying that would happen, but it's a ridiculous way to say what I'm saying. Suppose I said to you, Joe, I got this car and I want to sell it to you, and the payment, the car is $10,000. You need to give me $1,200 down, and the payments are $200 a month. Are you sold? Maybe, maybe not. But then I say to you, well, I'll tell you what, Joe, I really want to prove that this car is a good car to you and that I'm a loyal guy. So I'm going to give you this car, and I'm going to allow you to drive it for 2 weeks, unlimited miles. I'm going to pay for the maintenance. If you break down, I'm going to have a tow truck come and pick you up. I'm going to pay for the gas, and I'm going to turn the GPS on so wherever you go, you can have GPS. I'm going to pay for that too. See the difference? Mm-hmm. So if I didn't add all the benefits and the bonuses, then it may not be as appealing. But now it's like, well, what do you have to lose? So basically, what I call the second process is risk-free buying. You're eliminating all the risk from your buyer. Okay, so the least amount of risk you can give a buyer, the more valuable the product becomes. Now, Joe, suppose you were at my car lot and I gave you this car. You're driving around it for 2 weeks. Okay? In that 2 week period, you go to work, you go to a birthday party, and you go to a wedding in that 2 week period. Okay? What do you think you're going to talk about when you're at work, when you're at the birthday party, and when you're at the wedding?
No, the answering people's questions about the new car.
Or you'd be bragging about it. Like, I can't believe this guy gave me the car. Like, let's go for a ride. He's paying for the gas.
Yeah. That'd be part of it too, but yeah.
Right? Because it's so ridiculous that you're going to be telling everybody. So now, what I just did is I built in my advertising. So instead of paying for the advertising, I paid for you to advertise for me. It's still costing me money, but it's not, it's the same amount of money, it's just a different way to advertise. But the offer is so ridiculous that I'm handling the objection, stalls, and resistance prior to you giving them to me. Make sense? Is that clear? So step one is prospecting. Remember what step two is?
Al knows these, huh?
What does that mean now?
Communication with the person.
Good.
About their problem.
Yeah.
Just getting in communication with them. Just
How about number three, Al?
3 would be qualification.
Good. Qualifying.
Yeah.
Number 4.
Presentation.
Yeah. Which is what we're going to talk about tonight. And what's number 5?
Well, 5 is unimportant, but I was mentioning the close.
The close, where you get the money. All right. So last week at the end of the night, I kind of told you, I dropped the bomb, that if you don't close, what do?
Step back.
You go backwards. If they don't understand the presentation, what do?
Okay.
And if they don't qualify, what do?
Okay.
Get it? Obviously you do, because you said
You know, way back to number 1 and find another prospect.
it may not be a prospect, that's right. All right, so number 2, all right, so number 1 is locating someone to sell your product or service to. So going back to the valuable final product, what would we do with the valuable final product in locating that prospect? Who has the problem that the valuable final product will solve? So you want to get like-minded people for the valuable final product. Now, the last 3 weeks I've been talking about networking, and I told you that you need to pick networking groups that talk about the valuable final product, that they're like-minded people with the product, not with you. Okay? So if we're a plumbing service, and I talked about this quite a bit, if we're a plumbing service, and we just talked about our service fixing a leak out of a public of 100 people, say you're in a small town, you don't want to just talk about fixing the leak, because you're only going to have 3, 4, 5, 6 clients at a time, if you're lucky. If you instead do what I'm recommending and you sell information, which is how not to have a leak, or how to prevent the leak, or how to have the maintenance so the leaks are less frequent. Now how many people do you talk to? 100. You're still going to have those 5 or 6 people with a leak, but now you're going to become the opinion leader on leaks. Okay? So when the leak does happen, they call you first. But you always have 100 people to talk to. This is your prospecting stage. The opening stage is getting the prospect willing to communicate with you openly. So what does communication mean? Go ahead, Al.
I mean, you originate something with a guy, here's you, acknowledges you, and then he originates something, and then back to you.
Right. So you're sharing ideas.
Yes.
But the point is,
Plumbing agreements.
right, the point
Developing a
is,
mutual reality.
say it again?
Developing a mutual reality.
Right, this is the like-mindedness part of it. But the most important part about what Al said is the acknowledgement. How many times do you send advertising out there and don't get an acknowledgement? It becomes a one-way flow. It just goes this way, this way, this way, and never happens. Now, I go through this with my clients with Facebook, because I tell them, if I stood in front of you, if I put Al up here on the stage and him and I stood a foot apart, and I obsessively talked to him for 1 hour and never gave him a chance to answer me, what do you think would happen? He'd get angry?
Walk out after, what, 10 minutes?
Or he'd leave. He'd get angry or he'd leave, because I'm not allowing him to acknowledge me. Don't let that happen to your marketing, where all you're doing is talking about your product or your service, and you're not helping him. You're not sharing ideas. You're not communicating with him. You're not in communication. So communication doesn't mean that you're just sending out a piece of promo, a flyer, or an ad, or a piece of mail, or direct mail. Communication means you give them a call to action, which is a way for them to respond to the letter, to the postcard, to the email, whatever it is. It could be just as simple as go to my website or opt into this page. Give me your name and email address and I'll send you all this information. It could be as simple as I got this video series that's really spectacular and can help you. I can actually show you how to drain your hot water tank once a year, so you can save the life of your hot water tank and it could last 10 years instead of 5. It could be anything like that. And this is when I was talking about 2 weeks ago, your introductory service, because a lot of guys will take their $150 service mark a $25 or a 25% discount and sell it for a lesser price. That's okay. But it creates resentment with the owner because he's not making the amount of money that he should be. So instead of doing something like that, maybe you make a video series, or you make some white paper or some workshop or something where they can actually see how you do this, and you give them your professional advice. That would be a great introductory service, especially if it's a perceived value of a few $100s. Right? This is the communication. This is the opening step, where you're actually allowing them to communicate back to you with a call to action. Okay? Now, when you're in a nose-to-nose, toe-to-toe transaction, what would be an opening concept? Okay, that's a trick question. So let's say I was a chiropractor, and I meet Joe. And I walk up to Joe, I say, "Hey, Joe, how you feeling today?"
Fine. What do you want?
My name is Bill Hawthorne, and I'm one of the leading chiropractors in the area. I'm just kind of wondering, how's your overall health?
Okay. It's all right. It's okay. Yeah.
So is Joe a client? Probably not.
You just went to the third one and told me he's not qualified.
Exactly right.
He doesn't have a need for your service.
Exactly right, because qualifying is learning what he needs and wants, or I'll just read it here, learning what needs and wants your prospect has that your product or service might satisfy for him, and how ready and able the prospect is to acquire that product or service. Now, if Joe had a sore neck, how might he answer me?
The neck's been a little bothersome and stuff like that. Is there anything you can recommend that I can do for it?
No, I wouldn't even go that far. You know, once in a while I have a neck pain. Oh, what do you do about that, Joe? See, I'm pushing. I went from the opening right into the qualifying. Normally, I just have a few cocktails, or I take a couple aspirin. And, okay. And you're into two-way communication. Get it? Okay. Presentation. So how do we take this chiropractor thing and put it into a presentation? Well, Joe, today's Tuesday. I have an opening tomorrow afternoon and Thursday morning. Why don't you swing by the office and let me take a look? Normally, I charge $199, but because I just met you, I'd be willing to take a look. It won't cost you any money, and I'd like to just find out what the root cause of that neck pain is. Did you ever think about what it would be like if you didn't have neck pain?
I did 2 times. That's my 3rd drink.
Good. So why don't we meet, what's better for you, tomorrow afternoon or Thursday morning?
Yeah, tomorrow afternoon, about 4.
Good, okay? So what am I gonna do when he gets to the office? I'm gonna do the presentation. Okay? Now here's what happens on the presentation. You're enlightening. What does it mean to enlighten? Go ahead, Al.
Bring their awareness of something up.
Right. So what is his awareness low on?
His body, how it works.
Okay? Exactly right. So he's aware of the symptom. He's not aware of what's causing it. So my presentation needs to give him data on why it's being caused in the first place. So my presentation is going to do that. It's going to show him that it's a symptom that he's dealing with, but there's a root cause to it somewhere. And that, you know, for not a lot of money or not a lot of effort or whatever, it could go away forever. That's an enlightening process.
And that's based on, obviously, your experience or what you're having to offer. You tie those together.
You have to match your needs to the benefits of his services. That's what he's doing.
So it's going back to the qualifying step, which is learning what needs and wants your prospect has that your product or service might satisfy for him, and how ready and able the prospect is to acquire that product or service. What's the product or service? It's your BFP. So a good, valuable final product stated and you know what it is gives you a purpose to talk to that person. Or at least it clarifies if he's 1 through 3. Okay, so now for those of you that go to networking meetings and may not be able to sell something, like sometimes you could maybe do like a chiropractor might get invited to a Chamber of Commerce talk. And they'll say to him, we want you to talk at the Chamber of Commerce. But it's a non-selling environment. How do you do your presentation there? And this took me years to figure this out. Actually, in this club, it took me years to figure this out. So how do you sell in a non-selling environment with a presentation? Well, the way you do it is, and then I'm going to end off. The way you do it is you talk about the symptoms. And instead of saying, I can help you, what you do is you talk about all the clients and the people that you've helped in the past. So I might talk about neck pain and back pain, and I can say, well, I had a client just the other day, and he came into the office, and I did da 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 da, and he walked away. He hasn't had pain since. In the plumber's case, he can say, you know, I send out that newsletter every single month, and last month I sent out a newsletter saying how you can drain your hot water tank and how it saves the life of your hot water tank, and you know, you get an extra 5 or 6 years out of the life of your hot water tank. I actually had 3 people call me and tell me that that's exactly what happened to them. That they have water tanks that are 10 years old and they haven't replaced them because they've been listening to me for the last 5 years. And they actually called me and told me that. That's selling in a non-selling environment, because what you're doing is you're giving them evidence and proof that what you do works. And in final, what is a close? This is the most misunderstood part of any sales cycle. A close is not the money. A close is that they paid for the service and they're willing to receive it. So when you send them over to the production division, what are they ready for?
Their service.
Their service, their production. So you don't want to send them over to the production division, and the production division, and how many companies are like this? Well, the salesman said this and said that and said this, and then the production people are like, how are we going to do that? Well, he shouldn't have told you that. He promised you stuff we can't do. How many times have you heard that? So a good organization sets it up so when the close is done, it's not the guy that's the commission for the salesman gets paid when the money's in, when the service is paid for, and the client is ready to be delivered to. They're convinced that this is their solution.
That's right. That's the point.
And that's the product. Make sense? So the magic out of tonight's lecture is selling in a non-selling environment by giving a lot of examples of how you have done whatever it is that you're talking about. And if you're doing lectures, like the chiropractor in the Chamber of Commerce, at the end of the night, when he's doing the end of the lecture, people are going to come up to him and say, can you do that for me too? And he's going to give you some sort of contact information, and you just open the door to speak to him outside of the arena that you're in, the non-selling arena.
Not something like, how about shoulders, you need shoulders, you do back,
Right.
you do knees.
But the point is that you're gonna enlighten them enough, in other words, you're gonna give them enough data and convince them enough that you can do this with your presentation. This also works in a nose-to-nose, toe-to-toe environment. Last thing I want to say about the presentation is if you know what your 12 to 18 objection, stalls, and resistance are, and they're common, like, I can't afford it, and you hear that every other sales cycle, what should you put in your presentation?
Something about cost or lack of.
You're gonna handle that objection, stall, resistance in the presentation, so you don't get to the close, and you have to spend a lot of time at the close because you've already handled a lot of the objection, stalls, and resistance in the presentation. For example, I'll be talking to Joe about the pen, and he'll be saying, well, it's $10. I'll say in my presentation, well, you know what, Joe? I know that $10 is quite a bit of money, but we actually have a program where you can put a little bit down now and you can pay us as you go. It handles the objection of, well, I just handled the objection of, well, I don't have the money. It disabuses or debunks it. It goes away.
Diffuses the impact.
Yeah. So now when you get to the close, you don't have to handle those ridges or those stops where it's you and him and you're in the middle and you're smashing heads. A good presentation will handle those so the close is easier. When I was on the road for management success, I did 12 to 15 sales cycles a week. I would sit with 400 or 500 shop owners. I actually played a game with myself. I actually went 7 months. 7 months. Now I travel 40 weeks a year and spoke to dozens and dozens of guys. I went 7 months before I asked for a close. What I did is I had my presentation so good that they would say, so how do you do this? Or how do I get involved? Or how much does it cost? They would ask for the close. It was a game I played. Because the presentation handled all the objections, stalls, and resistance so nicely that at the very end, they would say, they would ask some question, which was a close question, and I would go from, that's when I knew I was done with the presentation. I'd stop the presentation and go into the close. Because they would ask for it. Good?
Give them what they asked for.
So we're at 30 Hazel Terrace, Woodbridge, unit number 21. I'm here every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Make sure you come and join me. Glad to have you. We help business owners expand their business and make lots of money with good, proper, standard operating procedures. See you next week.
No, I have a question for you, Joe.